Hey, folks, Colby Ryan has carried a burden that most of us can't imagine. Losing his siblings, JJ and Tylee, and then watching the justice system hold his own mother, Lori, and her new husband, Chad Daybell, accountable for their murders. His grief extends even further with the murder of his stepfather, Charles Vallow. And in this powerful interview, Colby's going to open up about the letters that Chad Daybell is writing right now from death row, the destructive leadership patterns of that doomsday belief system, and the deep cost of family enmeshment in cult-like dynamics. Together, Colby and I are going to expose the manipulative storytelling being used to rebrand these convicted killers. We're going to center the conversation where it belongs, on the victims: Tylee Ryan, JJ Vallow, Tammy Daybell, Charles Vallow, Brandon Boudreaux. I'm afraid the list might go on. Catch the full interview and join in the conversation by putting in your thoughts down in the comments below. And subscribe to Profiling Evil for more true crime analysis, including our series on the Daybell case and cult behaviors. Now, I want to encourage you to go over to Colby's channel as well and make sure that you're supporting him. Make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button, and let's make sure that this thing is really represented well. Now, I want to introduce Colby Ryan. Well, hey, folks, welcome back to Profiling Evil. Today's conversation is different, and I think it's a little personal. I'm sitting down with Colby Ryan, the son of convicted murderer Lori Daybell. Colby is not just Lori's son, though. He's Tylee's brother, JJ's big brother, and Charles Vallow's stepson. He's lived through a nightmare that I think most of us can barely imagine. And together, Colby and I have chatted back and forth since this nightmare began. But as you've come to kind of know it, I don't really like to bring people in until cases are adjudicated. We actually had some time together at CrimeCon, and we decided we were going to chat about it publicly. So, Colby, thanks for joining me on Profiling Evil.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was really good to see you, and I'm glad we can kind of have this conversation for others to get to know a little bit more.
Well, I don't know if people realize how, I mean, this in some ways is really traumatizing for you, and in other ways, I suspect it's all part of this dealing process that you've got to go through.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? Because you have so many layers, so many people of your family, and you have all these death dates and all these birthdays and all these things that you have these memories from. So it's very multi-layered.
Yeah, crazy. Well, I appreciate you taking time to do this, and I hope we've given this enough time so that you've had a chance to kind of sort through things. I in particular want to dive into Chad Daybell's prison letters, and I think I've made it pretty clear in my videos that I am incredibly offended by those. But I'm not any more offended by those as I am your mother's manipulative rhetoric and these destructive patterns of belief that turned your family, and frankly, I think the Daybell family, into this kind of walking crime scene. What are your thoughts?
So that's a great comparison, by the way. Is what's the difference between Lori and her interviews and Chad Daybell's letters? Well, to me, Lori isn't interviewing twice a week, every week, the way that the social media sites say that Chad Daybell's letters are going to come out. So that's the one difference. Um, we've never heard from him. We don't know what he's thinking, and pretty quickly you find out that him and Lori are cut from the same cloth, and the first thing they're going to say is that they're innocent, that they are good people, that they are people of God. And if I'm being honest with you, that's one of the biggest, I guess, word triggers in the world is to try to use God's name for all of this evil and try to say that this was them being good followers of Christ. And so that's also hurtful on top of all the other layers of losing your family. And then just to touch on Tammy's family, like I don't know exactly where everybody stands. I know how they feel about Chad. I have not spoken to them. And I think it's just because it is a sensitive topic, and it's just hard to navigate when somebody who has caused so much pain is now on social media. Everybody's going to read these letters. People know who Chad is, and claiming all these things, that he's a good guy, that he'd never do this, he loves his wife, and just on and on and on. It's the same thing, trying to make themselves look like good people. So it's really damaging, to be honest with you. It's hard.
Well, you're going to be airing this on your channel as well, and this is like an open forum. You can ask me any questions you want. I'm going to ask you questions, and just to kind of level set so that you're aware. And I don't know how deeply you've looked into my background, but I did a 28 years of law enforcement where I dealt with cults as an investigator. I led the ritual crime task force for the state of Utah looking at ritual crime. So I specifically focused on people who try to bend and twist uh, religion, and that you are dead center on, because there is nothing more powerful than when a person believes that they're following a prophet of God, or they're following God themselves, to then turn and ask them, even if we were to ask in legitimate circumstances, our listeners who have, hopefully, our listeners are filled with people of faith, whether it's Buddhism or Sikhism or Christianity or Islam or Judaism. And I've had the opportunity to work in all those circles. People of faith are deeply offended when someone takes something that's so sacred to them and turns it so that they can take advantage of them in a predatory way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the most manipulative kind of thing, right? I think the hardest thing is when when you grow up believing and you build your faith over time, and you hear the same name that you see and know is good and have studied and come to know for yourself, like the name of Jesus, be used in the same exact sentence as Jesus is telling me what to do. I have seen Jesus. I am witnessed Jesus. Jesus is my friend. Jesus is my savior. Well, it both can't be right. So I think it's a hard thing to see on a consistent basis, them constantly be blasphemous to God, honestly.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, as we go through this, I'm kind of going to springboard, starting with Chad's letters, writing from
Yeah.
death war, writing from death row,
Mhm.
and to me it's so frustrating, these letters that are filled with warm memories, filled with spiritual language, but
Right.
beneath all that is still this predator who was convicted of killing your brother and sister and his
Yeah.
wife. And
Mhm.
so when you talked about those letters, I wanted to just also tell you that after I completed a 30-year career, I went to work for an international company where I worked with the world's largest police departments, and spent the next 17 years of my career in airplanes talking with people and marketing the company that I worked for, which was a geography GIS mapping company. And I understand marketing, and all I feel like I'm watching, frankly, Cody, is a drip campaign in preparation
Yes.
for something else. What's your thought?
Ex 100%. I love that you said that. Look, we know for a fact that there's something about both Lori and Chad that want attention. That's just clear. I know, we know Chad is going to write a book at some point. This is a perfect example of, let's get my name out there. Let's have people read what I think and feel. And then when is he going to drop the book? Because Lori's going to drop a book. She said it in her interview. She said I'm currently writing a book. My whole entire life, you're going to get to know it. So from my perspective, there is a part of them that needs some kind of credibility, validation, something of that nature from the public, from people to hear what they have to say, even though they're delusional. But the reality is, I see those letters kind of being something like, let me get my name out there. And we know how, if social media tells us anything, there is ways to monetize it. Whether he gets it directly, it can still go to someone else and then be given to him indirectly. So it's not like they can't monetize off of it either. So I think there's a lot of different angles of why he's doing it, because here he is on death row, has nothing to do, and decides out of nowhere, I'm going to write letters every week about who I am, my past, my experiences, my spiritual whatever. I mean, where is this all coming from? That's the biggest question. What's the point? What are you trying to do here?
It's interesting, and I don't know if you caught my first video on letter number one that he put out, but I immediately drifted toward Adolf Hitler and Mein Kampf. This effort to go in and rewrite history in a more favorable way. And we've seen it even in politics today, that if you continue to tell a lie enough times, people either become fatigued or they start to forget and they start to
Mhm.
believe the new reality rather than the old. So when you talk about the idea of writing a book and wanting to write a book, I always go back to what's the motivation. And currency is not always a dollar you can hold in your hand. There are other forms of currency that predators prefer even more than money. And I believe that the currency that they're after, knowing that legally, if they write a book, that the courts are going to take that and push that, rightly so, to the victims. The currency is much more valuable to them than financial gain. But I was troubled when the new website came out, and people can go to the website if they want and look at those goofy letters. Clearly at the top of that website is an indication this is not for monetary gain. Well, I believe it is for gain, and whether somebody's going to get a dollar through a back door or a book is going to be written and the victims will ultimately get a tiny portion after lawyers and everyone else get their portions. I don't know, but I think the currency is much bigger. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I mean, look, this the hardest part about it all is the story that's being told is fabricated, right? There's just so much evidence against what he's saying and what Lori's saying. And so I really have tried to dive in on the channel about, well, what is the psychology behind this? Like, what are they trying to gain here? Because they can't directly get the money. I mean, I don't know if Lori can get the money. I don't know if she has somebody who will give it to her if she does something. But with Chad's family, if I'm being honest, my biggest thing with it is like it feels like he has to keep his hooks in the people that believe in him, which I think are his kids from what I've seen. Now I don't know how current that is, but I've seen how much they defend him.
Discussion, because one of the things that people sometimes are critical of children and their responses, and I've never been one to believe in being critical about what the responses of family are. Number one, they've lost their mother in the
Right.
Daybell case. They have lost their father through the criminal justice case, and
Mhm.
we've seen over and over again that the kids still they love their parents. You'd probably love your mom deeply, but you don't love the behavior and the wacky person that she became.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Explain kind of your thoughts in regard to that, because you've taken a very clear stand that Lori is different than mom.
Yeah, and you know what it is? It really is just I learned in life that at some point you have to pick a side. And what I mean is that this is evil. This is evil. What they believe is evil. And you can love someone with all your heart and also know that what they've done is evil and what they are saying is evil and what they're doing is harmful to this day. So for me, it was like, well, I know this isn't teachings of Jesus. I had to come to my own spiritual thing because of this, because I had to go through this. I had to go figure out what I believed because it was all destroyed. Like just part of the wake was my belief system because I thought my mom was a good person. I thought she was this good, devout mom who served the Lord and was serving children and all this kind of stuff. So I had a really I was deeply shattered by all of this in so many different ways. My biggest thing is I understand loving your parent. I understand that perspective. But my other biggest problem is at some point the reality does have to set in. You do have to look at the facts and you do have to make a decision. And my problem that I have with the situation is just seeing the turned face, blinding eyes, whatever you want to call it, is seeing that there is no, my dad's a good person. He never did this. He was framed. He was put in this position by Lori, like just all of that stuff, which is just not true. It's just not true. And so that's where my issue is really with it, is that it's just zero acknowledgement of reality, and almost like this belief system behind the scenes that they have, that Chad and Lori are being attacked by the general public for being good people, or that Chad, if we're just talking about Chad, that the reason he's being persecuted is because he is a prophet, which is a lie. So it's hard to see it, to be honest with you. It's hard to see support in his favor in what he did and say he didn't do it.
Uh, yeah, I really appreciate that. Do you ever see a day where you and the Daybell children sit down and have a chat?
That's a great question, because I'm not opposed to talking to them. And that's the thing. I've tried to explain this before. It's not like I hate them. I don't even know them. The truth is, right? Like, and that's the thing. It's been like made enemies kind of thing, right? They've said stuff about me, whatever. I've reacted to it. I've kind of stood my ground with it, but I've never attacked them. I've never went out of my way. I don't know them. I've never met them in my life. Would If there could be a way that I could at least say what I just said to you to them in a very calm way, and just have them have a thought provoking thought that possibly what I'm saying is true, then yeah, I would talk to them, because I don't have malice in my heart for them. I don't want anything bad for them in their lives. I fundamentally disagree with what they're doing, and I can see where it's coming from. And it's coming from a lifetime of indoctrination, in a lifetime of a man telling you he's a prophet or whatever spiritual stuff he did and said. It's how do you do that? How do you turn on your dad? But I understand, because I had to figure out how I knew what my mom did was wrong, and I can't stand for it no matter who my mom was. And so I think it's also hard because some people can't believe the information. They just can't believe it. It's too hard to conceive, so they just never go there. I think that may be another part of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think back to the trial, and there was the trials
Mhm.
on both your mom's side and Chad's side, witness testimony that was incredible, uh, and frankly, even damning from both the defense and the prosecution side. The defense didn't offer anybody that made people feel any more confident that this was a setup versus this was an apocalyptic framework. The light and dark, the zombies, the translated beings. You mentioned in your mind that Daybell's children may have had a lifetime of indoctrination. Was your mother's uh, ritual kind of bizarreness dramatically changing, or was it consistently um, evolving to the point that it became what it did? I always said that one of the characteristics of cults, in my experience, was that they always experienced or are always expressed the need for more light and knowledge than anyone else. They had to have the secret inside path, the direct
Right.
line of authority, those kinds of things. What are your thoughts around that?
That's a great question too. I love the way that you're framing it, because so when I was growing up, I would consider, because I grew up obviously LDS because my mom was LDS. I would consider us like what everybody calls Jack Mormons, in a sense, where we weren't super followers of the rules. Like, we didn't really go to church that much when I was younger, like really younger. Um, my mom always had a belief system. My mom taught me how to pray and believe in God. My mom, one thing she did in my life was she taught me to like pray for myself. She taught me how to like seek a relationship with God by praying. That was what she taught me. So I had prayed for things and seen God in my life. And then obviously I went through a lot when I was a kid, and I would pray and I could just feel God's presence. So I had a testimony of God from an early point in my life. When it came to her and religion, that kicked up over time. Now, there was moments, I've mentioned this before, there's moments like where she came to me and told me, I've got 2 years to live, I'm going to die. I'm going to die in 2 years. And things like that that you don't know what to do with when you're 8 years old.
Yeah,
You're
I was going to
terrified.
just say, how traumatizing for a child to hear that kind of malarkey.
Right. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? You're helpless. Nothing you can do. And then, like when things got hard, we'd run away. And, the whole idea of doing a group driving off the cliff as a family when I was, I think, 11, 10 maybe. So not too much away from that time. Those kind of things were the extreme part of her, but the religious extreme, it felt like it really kicked in after we moved to Hawaii. So 2014 is when she was like flying from Kauai to Oahu to go to the temple almost every week. Like she needed to be in the temple. She needed to be doing something. She was buying the books. But again, I'm 18, 19. I'm not paying attention to what she's doing. I'm just not. I notice what she's her going to the temple, but I'm not thinking like, oh, what books is she reading? What author is she into right now? It really kicked in when we moved back though. So that was kind of like when I noticed a big shift in like her devotion to the LDS church. When we moved back to Arizona, I came back from college, and that's when I was with my wife and like had just started dating her. And that's when I feel like when I left, it went from 0 to 100 as far as a gear shift. And I think it's because I was out of the house. Tylee was busy with school and friends, and JJ was at school. So she literally had nothing to do. And I think that time that she had really just, I've talked about this before. I think you and I can agree that most of the time some of these things exist prior to like the big explosion. It's not just like out of nowhere. But she always had like a very fantasy, she loved fantasy. I think she got lost in fantasy. And so I pull that because I think that's really important here in context is I think once she started reading those books, I remember the name Julie Rowe. I know that. I'd heard that name at least
Hmm.
once. But I didn't know who Julie Rowe was. So it's not like it mattered in context. But she, I think, fell in love with this idea that there was this so much going on and this idea that there was something so much bigger than what she was doing that she couldn't be happy where she was. She had to have some purpose or something of that nature. And it all kind of led down this path to once she met Chad, she was already kind of there and he just pushed her over the edge. I think that's what happened.
I've often uh, identified the two as gasoline and flame coming together. And I would like to. I'm kind of in this place in my life where I'd like to write a book about the cult playbook, but I don't want anybody to know the information, although I think the cult leaders already do. I mean, throughout my career, I see these cult leaders that come together and they start by winning people over through their charm and charisma. But once they build trust, that's when they start to introduce fear of being maybe left behind, or fear of spiritual darkness, or a fear of losing God's favor. And as they tighten this grip, that's when they start claiming private revelation, and they have these secrets that nobody else has. So they're combining charm, fear, secret knowledge, and it becomes this leash that keeps followers under control. And I really like your thoughts about that.
So I think it's funny because this whole situation has taken me down a very similar path of research. I've stepped into, I think it was weird. You brought up Hitler before. It came to me the same idea. It's like, how did someone get people to do that? How do you do it? And it's not coming from a sensational place. It's literally just the psychology. How did he get people to invoke his ideas? And then you start looking at what Germany was like at that time. You look at the hopelessness, you look at how he spoke, you look at all these different factors, right? Well, when it comes to Lori, one thing I can tell you for a fact is that she was not pleased with not having a LDS husband. And I think that she always wanted a spiritual giant or spiritual equal, because she basically would get with someone and then they would get baptized and then they would be the convert, and that she would, I guess, be the veteran, whatever you want to call it. But no one was ever like interested in her spiritual stuff like she was. So what's interests me the most is she does not seem like one to be led. She's not someone I would be like, oh yeah, she's a follower. She's usually more of a leader. More people are more, come to her. Like, she ran all the family parties. She led that stuff. She led the events. She led primary. She led singing time. She always had like leadership roles. So it's really interesting to watch a dynamic where she goes from being a leader to now listening to someone tell her this stuff that's so unbiblical, so not even in the LDS lore. And I try to say that all the time because people get mad that I said anything about the LDS. I'm just saying it's not even part of the church. It's not part of the LDS church at all. It has nothing to do with it. So my question became, well, how did he do it? The biggest part with this whole idea that Chad came in and, like you said, gasoline and match. Once they got together, I think he wanted her so badly that he'd tell her anything she wanted to hear, and she wanted to hear it. And I think he worshiped her like a goddess, and she loved that. And so what he said was a lot easier to follow because she was getting something that her ego or whatever part of her was being pleased. But I did notice the fear side too, right? When she said, I can't do this with you anymore, they were going to break up at one point. And he goes, well, I can't protect you. So you need to text me a thumbs up, or your protection, the bubble that I've put over you is gone. There's the fear. So it was interesting because it to the T, like what cult leaders do to keep people in line once they maybe have ideas of, hey, that shouldn't be here. It's like, no, here's the grip from him. It's manipulation. And again, just to reiterate this one point, this is why I think his letters are dangerous, in my personal opinion. I understand free speech, but this is very, very different situation when it comes to him having free reign to say things and indoctrinate people.
Hey folks, it's Mike from Profiling Evil, and I got to tell you about one of my new secret weapons. It's called newspapers.com, and I am on there all the time, digging up old headlines, solving pieces of criminal puzzles, and even uncovering wild stuff from my own family tree. So if you love going down the rabbit hole as much as I do, whether it's chasing a cold case or uncovering grandma's mysterious past, this is a place to start. Now you can use our special link for a sweet discount, and yes, I do get a small commission, so you're helping grow the channel too. So just head to the link in the description below and start exploring. The thing that I find myself so angry about is that it rewrites a judicial record that says you are not a persecuted martyr, you are a killer.
Yeah.
And that narrative cannot be rewritten by this. And I think I usually take a pretty even plane on videos that I do, but this, because I've seen it over and again, whether it's in the FLDS or in other cults like the Zion Society or this one, the dynamics are so similar and so cockeyed, offensive. Yeah, I think about your Uncle Alex for a
Mhm.
moment. If are you okay talking there for a
Yeah, we
minute?
can talk about it. I've talked about it on my channel, so we can definitely talk about it.
Okay. Okay. So kind of central in the timeline of killing Charles and the kids and Tammy. Um, Dies of natural causes. They say pulmonary emboli or something, if I remember the ME's report. It's been a long time since I've read that, but um, how has this tangled loyalty and his placement in this whole picture impacted you, and what are your thoughts? Because family enmeshment is really a tough thing in these cult cases, because outsiders are trying to still love and support and hope that their loved one, Lori, gets their senses about them and comes back. But the realities are, it's usually a path they have to figure out on their own.
Yeah. It's so I never imagined, first of all, that Alex could do it. Like when I first heard Alex's involvement, I was like, there's no way you're that stupid. There's no way they were able to get to you. I did not know he had that much loyalty to Lori. I did not know. I just didn't really look into it. So once I watched the trials, a lot came to light, and I started to do some psychological deep diving on Alex. The reality is, number one, it was really hard because I wasn't close to Alex, but I'd had my moments with him. He was my uncle. He was at our family functions. He was kind of the pop in, pop out person until my wedding. For some reason, he was really close with my mom. And I remember taking notice of that in 2018. I was like, huh, he's never really around. He's here a lot. He's always here when we come over to the house, which is where we were having the wedding. And he's really helpful. So those were like, those stood out because he's not around a lot. When I heard about everything, especially even with Charles, my opinion of him changed from Charles. That was it. That was my opinion changed of Alex. I never wanted to see Alex. I never wanted to be around him again. Like it didn't. I knew in my stomach that something was wrong, and I just kept thinking to myself, even if that were the case, wouldn't you shoot someone in their like leg, or shoot a shot in the ceiling to scare them, or shoot by them first before taking a shot? And I understand, like I've done a ton of research on police officers in those moments, and just there's so many different scenarios where it's like in reality I knew that for some reason that something felt wrong.
And so when you see this moment in time when, according to Zulema, that
Hmm. Hmm.
Alex says something to the effect of, "Holy cow, they're going to frame me for this," or something. Do you think he ever had a moment where he all of a sudden thought, this isn't about religion or anything else? Or do you think he all along just had it in him to commit homicide?
I think at first, if my assessment was when I finally learned more. What I mean by that is watch the case. I watched my mom's trial, not the entire thing, but a lot of the key points. And once I heard everything, I really came to the conclusion that Alex was the most indoctrinated of the three, the most believing. Once though he saw the betrayal, I do think he had a moment of fear, and I think he started to question if it was real. And I think the stress got to him. Um, the fact that he died the way that he did is, I don't know, it's just the most wild thing ever. Like the timing, the everything about it just will never make sense to me. The only conclusion I've ever come to is just either the stress got him or God said it's time for you to go. It's one of the two. And I think he did have that moment though of fear. And I think he questioned. But I think before that time, I think he was the most deep in. I think he believed it more than anybody else over Lori and Chad.
Yeah. Imagine if you're in a conspiratory mindset like Lori and Chad, and Alex has that aha moment, that the risk he poses, and yet we have to accept the medical examiner's finding, although Tammy's was found as natural too until deeper investigation. So I guess the jury is still out on that. But when we talk about those two coming together, that fuel and flame coming together, do you think they were destined for this collapse, through this ritual crime process? Did their pairing supercharge the risk and create the perfect storm? Or were these just two massive storms colliding and they would have gone on to do their own wacky stuff with or without each other? What are your thoughts there?
That's a great question too. I truly believe that they might not have got where they got to without each other. But I do believe they're both very mentally unstable. I do believe that they're both heading down the wrong path. They wouldn't have, so I don't, again, Chad probably would have never done what he did without the incentive of wanting to be with Lori. What her incentive was to be with him will never make, neither one of it will never make sense. But I don't think she would have done anything to Charles or the kids had she not had him. And that was her apple of her eye, apparently. So, to answer your question in a really, I guess, confusing way, is they both would have continued to go down a weird religious path. I don't think they would have done any type of homicides. I don't think they would have gone down that path. I don't think Lori would have went to Alex at one day and said, "You need to do this to the kids and the family," without Chad. And I don't think Chad would have said the same thing about Tammy unless he wanted to be with Lori. So, but religiously and how crazy they both were prior and how long they could have gone down that path, who knows where that would have led.
Boy, isn't that the truth? The texts and the testimony showed obvious planning language, the spiritual scoring, the victims light and dark, zombies, etc. But when you think about those communications, do you think it was at that point true delusion, or were they trying to rid themselves of, and I'm so sorry to even present this, to rid themselves of the motherly or responsibility of Tylee and JJ, but still collect the income? What?
Yeah. No, yeah, I think if you look at them now, they've both walked back a lot since this went public, right? They're not convicted of their belief system. You've not heard Lori said there's never been zombies. She's backpedaled everything except for basically almost sounding like she's back to almost just being LDS. And she's tried to walk back everything in those texts, all those seance prayers, all those gatherings, all those castings, all everything they did. She backwalked it all. So my personal belief is that it's very complex, right? Alex, I think, believed the most. Lori her head's in the clouds. So whatever she was thinking about and wanting to do, she just was able to rid herself of all guilt and thoughts and feelings because she's just so out of here. Like the most disassociated you could possibly be. Chad is Chad, I cannot figure out. I don't know. I don't know if he seems so cold and callous. Chad seems to be more like a psychopath to me, like someone who just doesn't have any empathy, who lacks any kind of reaction to anything. Like he just seems so dead and cold. So I think based off of some of Chad's thoughts and feelings that he thought it was okay to do it, but he needed to lead the group by giving them some religious reason, right? Like you can't just come up and say, "Hey, you need to do what I say." It's like, well, why? That's what you go back to the cult leaders. They have to have some kind of way to pull you in. And so I think he was aware that his religious stuff was able to cause and stir storms in people. Then he saw he could get Lori because she's biting the line. And then she's got Alex. How perfect is that? So that's how I look at it. I think he was the most out of it, Chad, the one who's telling everybody everything. Lori's in the middle because she wanted to believe it, but I think she's a little bit more just out of there, just disassociated. And I think Alex was actually the most believing. So that's how I've always viewed those three.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. From the investigator perspective, what I see is delusion being turned into a weapon of control. And,
Yeah.
and that is really frightening to me because these beliefs weren't just odd or eccentric. I, I think they were shaped in very tactical ways that it justified, because morally, doing something like this, murdering, is wrong. But if you're doing God's will, then I'm not going to offend God. That saying we've heard these distorted, self-proclaimed prophets say many, many times. And I often said, if Lori were or Chad were crazy, and I'm now making a diagnosis, so please forgive me for that. But if they were crazy, they would have been on top of the roof after committing those homicides, yelling, "I got rid of another zombie." But
Exactly.
instead, they're hiding away. So they're convincing their followers. They're trying to convince us even today, through their distorted lens, that they have authority, and that authority would then excuse violence, because divinity is always necessary. You know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think what's so hard about that whole situation is there was probably at one point a good thought like, "Oh, I'm gonna try to follow this religious stuff harder, and here's somebody who really gets it." But then it turns into that where she's weaponizing herself towards him. He's weaponizing spiritual manipulation and powers and things, which I don't know how she believed that he had that. And he desired her and was, it's just this huge loop. Where Alex comes in, what he got out of it, I don't understand. Like what was Alex's gain other than Alex probably this is my opinion and diagnosis of this situation is Alex had always felt like a black sheep who needed to earn his way back. He'd been excommunicated from the church multiple times. I think he thought he was a screw up. And here comes somebody who says, you are actually really special. All your trials in your life, everything you've ever been through is for this purpose because you're so special. The devil's trying to get you, trying to stop you. And that's why your life's been so hard. But I'll tell you something, I'm a prophet. And I'm telling you right now, God's happy with you. God's pleased with you. And he wants you to do this thing for him. You just need to sacrifice and do this thing. And once you do that, you're going to be back in good standing with God. That's the manipulation. And Chad is able to do it. It's real. And he was able to convince Alex somehow. I don't know. I'll never understand it, right? Because like we talked about, most cult leaders have some kind of quality of following them. Something about them, passion, the way they speak, the way something about them makes you follow them. Why you'd follow Chad Daybell anywhere, I'll never understand. But it is what happened.
That is so insightful. Thank you, because if you make somebody feel special, they're elite. They have a to use the vernacular that they would have used, that they are secure in their calling on earth. That's very empowering to people. I was really offended at Lori's sentencing in particular, when she said that the kids were happy and busy in the spirit world. And I think we believe that as Christians, that if we believe in a life hereafter, that it wouldn't be a sad life if you're back with a loving God. So I'm okay with the idea that they're happy, but for her to cast them as happy was personally offensive to me. But I wondered how you felt about that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing she told me in our interview that I did on my channel, I called her last year around this time, some almost a year ago, and I just gave her a chance to say her piece. The first thing she tells me is Tylee came back to her multiple times. Her JJ and Tylee come back to her, and she says Tylee apologized for being a brat her whole life to me. Right, so Tylee left heaven to come to Lori in the spirit and apologize for being a brat to her. And then she says that she has all these visitations, and JJ and Tylee have basically told her how great of a mother she is, what a wonderful mother she is, and basically visit her to comfort her and acknowledge her as a spiritual giant. It's nuts. It's nuts, right? So when she started saying stuff like that, where it's like, I mean, once she got to that point where she told me that Tylee took JJ's life and then took her own life, and then she found them, and then basically just said, take their bodies, do what you want with them, and then went to Hawaii and got married, but was heartbroken on the floor, right? She said, you don't know about what I went through, right? She's such a narcissist. And I mean, if you want to know the definition of narcissist, you can look it up, and the picture in there is Lori. I'm telling you, it's insane because everything is about her. So when she said that about them being happy, that's another way of her selling that what she did wasn't the worst thing ever. She has to live in that reality, because if she goes ever steps out of the realm of her delusions that she's self-inflicting, mind you, I really believe, this is my opinion, she's self-inflicting delusions, because on the other side is the reality that you took your husband's life, your daughter's life, your son's life, and you were part of the death of your husband's wife, and that you
Yeah.
tried to take another life, which was Brandon, right? So it's a long list, and I think she's protecting herself in her brain, because the reality of that would crumble her.
You are nailing so many important things, because this is classic martyr narrative. I mean,
Mhm.
I've talked to so many stinking cult leaders. I sometimes think, man, why didn't I just go to work as a baker or something and not have to deal with this? But it takes personal pain and punishment away from the individual, twists it into a supposed proof of divine purpose. So instead of facing accountability, Lori and Chad are casting themselves as suffering servants, which is so stinking offensive to me. People who are enduring hardship not because of their own choices, which leads me to my next question about how do you feel about um, Chad? He's still trying to reassert that he's a self-proclaimed prophet, but now your mom saying, all of this is the God that she believes in's will to put her in the prison to save the souls of all those poor women in prison.
This is what I'll tell you. I think that both of them deep down in their hearts know the reality. I truly do believe that. I believe that they both know that that is not true. But I think it's easier to stick with what you've been, I guess, whatever made you excited in the first place, whatever got them so excited about this idea that there's multiple lives in the spirit realm, and this whole idea of like portaling, like all this stuff that got them so excited about this stuff. It's just easier to stay there and protect your brain. I think that they're them pitching the idea that the only reason they're in prison is to preach the gospel is just like adding to the list of what you're going to have to answer for on judgment day. And I hate to be any less, I mean, that's as blunt as I can be. Like, you can't tell me you feel secure about going and meeting your maker at the end of this and saying, I was your faithful servant, when you know that's not why you're in prison. Because there are people who they say they believe in, prophets in the Bible, that suffered for their belief system. And like you mentioned earlier, why wouldn't you stick by your convictions? Where is that? Where'd all that conviction go? You were real enough to take life over it. Why are you backtracking it now? So the reality is, they're gonna probably pitch that for the rest of their lives to protect themselves. And I think they both want the public to think they missed the truth of them, and that the justice system just decided we're gonna go get them, because that is classic martyr, classic, you know, die for the cause. And they want to believe that they have some type of cause, as if they just didn't steal and cheat and do all those things, right? It's like none of that exists, only that they are good people and that the justice system came after them. So, yeah, I hope they're not talking to anybody. I hope they don't ever preach a word to a single person, honestly.
Yeah. No, I really feel bad because our time is winding down, and I got so
Yeah.
many questions that I want to
You're
ask.
good.
But when you think about these high-profile cases, you think about your case, incredibly high profile, or you think about the Delphi case and all the attention it's gotten, or a John Bonet, and you had the opportunity to meet some other families while we were at CrimeCon and see. number one, that you're not alone, but you saw this incredible crowd of 7,000 people who are interested in this. And thankfully, that group, in my opinion, is very respectful. But what do you think about the mass attention to these criminal cases, the fire hose of attention that comes? And what was that experience like for you? Because again, I really worry about this true crime community that we're a part of, because some can really exploit versus help. What are your thoughts?
I love that you said that. Number one, it should be about learning, and the exposure of what's happened is about learning for our society, for us to be better people, to identify cults, to identify maybe people who you see around you that are going off their rocker. That should be the point of talking about this stuff, right? It should always lead back to something, and then honoring, the victims and people who are dealing and grieving. The hard part is I learned a really hard lesson in media. I learned how media works very quickly. And that was probably the hardest part, because you feel like you're talking like this, and it's like nothing you said actually came out of your mouth. Only 2% of what you said made it. And that is, I just never knew. I never knew that's how it worked. And so you really understand what it's like out there. And when you get so much attention and you get so many eyeballs, in the beginning, I had people telling me, you're the one. I mean, comments on every social media post, people taking pictures of me at Walmart. Lori Vallow's son's shopping for watermelons. Okay. Yeah, I'm right there. That's me. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But it's so high profile that everyone doesn't know what's going on. And there's so much information out there and so much untrue information. And then all these TV shows pick it up and they say one thing wrong and that gets picked up and that, so I learned so much about it. What I've always tried to do on my channel is just say, look, there's situations that are high profile like this. It's recentering to what's really going on. If someone's missing, a child's missing, a person's missing, that's the focus until we can try to figure out what's going on. If there's a criminal on the loose, we got to figure that out and just try to really recenter it, because it is chaos, and you get the public opinion on top of the media, and everyone is asking you questions as if they have, and I hate to sound like rude, but like in the beginning people are like, ask you stuff like if they saw you at Target, right? They're like, "So you contact with your mom? Could you call her right now?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, first of all, no. Secondly, what entitlement do you have? Just because you saw this on TV, it doesn't mean you can just walk up and ask me a question like that. So that's what I think I've tried to do, is just rehumanize ourselves on the channel, rehumanize the victims, and really bring it back to reality. Like, this is somebody's life, and I had to unfortunately experience that. The best thing I can tell people is just, if you're in that situation ever, try to find your own voice, whatever that looks like, and hopefully people can hear what you have to say, not what everybody else is just going to spin on it. But it's a difficult thing to navigate for sure.
Yeah. So, tell me the coolest memory you have of Charles Vallow.
Coolest memory when I
The
first
most,
met Charles.
or the most meaningful to you personally that you reflect on often.
So I'll tell you both real quick, because they're both pretty quickly. My coolest memory ever is when I first met Charles. There was a movie that was really popular at the time called Are We There Yet? And it was with Ice Cube. Charles had the same car. It's a Lincoln Navigator, and it had the TVs in the back seat. And he wore, nice clothes and tucked in. His shirt was tucked in, and he had his dress pants and his shoes. I thought he was like a baller. I was like, this guy is cool as he's smooth, right? He also did something for our family when my mom got divorced. We we got we basically received, because we had left the house without taking anything, so we basically got our stuff later. We had 3 forks, 3 knives, 3 spoons, just three, because there was me, Tylee, and my mom. So we had nothing like as far as silverware or any appliances and things like that. We moved into our other house. So Charles went out of his way to go to Costco when they was dating my mom, and we came home and he had filled our kitchen with like head to toe appliances, like dating. not engaged, nothing of that nature. He just did that because that's who he was. And so I remember thinking like, this man wants to take care of our family. And so that's one of the things I told my mom, like, yeah, I was 10 years old. I didn't even know, but it's like this, he obviously cares. Right. One of my most fond memories, I mean, we went on so many vacations, had so much fun together. One of the most, it's crazy how life happens like this, but in 2018, before I had my daughter, he started to want to meet up with me, as just man to man, and talk to me about where I was at and what I was thinking and feeling. And I talked about learning his business, and I wanted to like, I really like told him, I'm like, you obviously are amazing at what you do. I'd love to learn from you. And just that connection we had as men was like the most special thing, because you don't always get that moment, but we did have that, and it was right before unfortunately everything happened. But I got to have one-on-one time with him as a man, talk about my life, talk about being a dad, talk about all these different things that you just don't really do when you're growing up. We didn't have a lot of one-on-one time like that. So those are the things that I hold the most dear to me, is just the time I had with him in simple moments, over the Disneyland trips or the funny things that we did. You know, that those are the things I hold on to dearly.
That is awesome. What about Tylee?
Me and Ty have had our whole childhoods together. We have a million memories. We were the classic siblings. We were the frenemies. We hated each other and loved each other. Um, One of the best memories ever with Tylee is, and I always tell the story. So people who have heard the story, I always tell the story. When it was Christmas, I think I was about 17, 18 years old. I'm older than her, right? And we were at Ross, and my mom said for Christmas we could take our budgets and go buy whatever. That was our Christmas gift rather than like getting gifts. So we're like, cool, we'll go get all our stuff. Well, they had a bunch of stuff that I wanted. So I was like way over my budget. And my little sister, who's, I don't remember how old she was, but she gave up the rest of her budget, almost like maybe over $100 of that, to me, so I could go be selfish and get the things that I wanted. And the reason that memory sticks with me so hard is because no kid does that. No child sacrifices what they want for someone else, especially someone who's older than them. And it showed me what a caring, loving person my sister was. And that's like one of those things, like, obviously, just the conversations that I've had with her, the times we've sat in the car on car rides and played games, I Spy, talking, doing a radio show where you call in and have to pretend to answer a question to win a Ferrari, right? Like those things are amazing memories. But I have those type of moments like that where I could really see my sister now, that I look back on when I think of my memories. That's the things that stick out to me, is the small moments and then knowing who she was, seeing who she was.
Wow. Okay, now here's the tough one.
Mhm.
That little boy you adopted into your life. Tell me about JJ.
Man, if JJ could tell you anything, he would tell you how much wrestling, WWE, fighting, playing. I threw that kid up in the air 100 feet on the trampoline. Like I play with JJ constantly. The most special summer I ever had with JJ is when I came back from college. My wife and I babysat him all summer because my mom asked us to just kind of watch him over the summer. So we just got to take him all the time with us. And so we took him to Chuck E. Cheese. We took him to Toys R Us when it was still open. We took him everywhere. And it was just like the same thing, simple, fun times, going on a little mini game with him, watching him ride one of those fake roller coaster simulators. Like those memories are what I miss. That's the stuff I miss the most, is a moment with him doing something super simple, watching him go bowling, watching him do something for the first time, and just enjoying himself. JJ had so much energy that every time you were with him, you could eat, you could have fun. He's just going to make it fun, because doing simple things with him was just so enjoyable, and he was so energetic.
Colby, I can't I can't thank you enough. I mean, we held off talking for an awfully long time, and I am so grateful. And I don't know if you have any questions, but I'm going to let you have the final word.
Yeah, no, and I want to say thank you. And what really draws me to you is the fact that you can talk about these subjects, that you do rehumanize, that you do hit on these things, not to try to get people to say, "Oh my gosh," and the gasp, right? You're not looking for the shock. And I think that's what makes it easy to have this conversation is I know that these conversations can be helpful to other people, and that's all I want. And I'm grateful we got to do this, and I'm grateful we got to talk, and I'm grateful I got to see you at CrimeCon. I liked your shirt, by the way. I didn't tell you that. I liked the shirt with the logo. I was like, that's clean. I gotta steal that one. I'm gonna have to put my logo on the shirt though. I like that.
Difference between cults and traditional um, mainstream religions, whether it's Islam or Judaism or Christianity, is that cults do things in secrecy where mainstream religions point toward the God in which they believe in. And I just think people of faith, regardless, uh, are so fortunate. And I see so many people that have no faith and have no hope. And I see a lot of people that want to blame faiths for the decisions that predators make within those. And that was the secret sauce when I talked to police officers, was that when you are investigating crimes that involve ritual behavior, focus on the elements of the crime, the elements that prove murder, the elements that prove sexual assault, and then bring in all the wacky beliefs later in the sentencing. But don't cloud the water. How can people follow you and find you?
So my YouTube channel is Colby J Ryan, and my Instagram and my X are the same exact one. So that's how you can find me on here.
And you know, folks, I mean, all of this that we've talked about tonight is exactly why we can't let prison letters or martyr style monologues rewrite realities. The reality and the record is still really clear. And I hope that you continue to focus on that. These murder cases were proven in court. The forensics are undeniable. The verdicts stand. And our job is to hold truth steady and make sure that it isn't buried under spin or sediment. With what's happening right now with Chad Daybell, I believe is a marketing play to rewrite history. And more than anything, I think we need to honor Tylee and JJ and Tammy and Charles and Brandon. Uh, and you know what? The list may go on, Colby. I just don't know, but we need to keep those stories alive. And I want to thank all of you for supporting Profiling Evil. And I hope you're checking us out on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, especially if you like your true crime on the go, check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And from all of us at Profiling Evil, which happens to be me now that the back office has all abandoned me, thanks so much. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.